Okay, I'll begin by, I'm Andrew Fairney, and I'm a colleague of Kim Thompson's, and we're working together on a project that I'll go into in a second, but I'd just like to start with, my family is, we're up here in the hills now, but part of the family comes from agriculture on Kangaroo Island, and it's sheep, essentially, and we had, when I say we, it's my uncle and my mum when she was young, 2 horses, and the rest of the property was sheep. And the 2 horses were ridden all the time, and they were in one paddock. I have no idea what grasses they were, but my uncle tells me it was native grass. It was 10 hectares, and they never got fed anything else other than what was in there all year round. They never had any supplements, they never had hay given to them, they never had anything, and they were healthy horses. So I just thought I'd add that in right at the beginning. This is the project that we're working on in the Upper Torrens catchment. Essentially, we just call it the Grassy Groundcover Restoration Project, just to try and keep it shorter, we just say GGRP. We got federal government funding, and what we are doing is restoring 200 hectares of grassy woodland, reconstructing another 200 hectares, and reducing threats to a total of 500 hectares. So this is all happening over a 6-year period, and we've got about just over 2 years left. So we're at the point where we're just so busy, I need a holiday. I'm actually on holidays anyway. So the idea is, generally speaking, we are protecting and enhancing the landscapes that we've lost. So the remnant vegetation of grassy woodlands, we're extending them and improving them, increasing the species that are there, or the numbers of species. This is just a picture just to give you an idea of, it's one of our trial sites. We trialled different ways that we could treat the land before sowing, just to see a difference in the germination or emergence of the species sown. This is, you can see Kim there with the umbrella. It wasn't really raining that much, but anyway, that was to keep the page dry, that's right. So you can see all the native grasses there, that's in the foreground especially, well, right through the whole thing. The only weeds that are visible in this picture are sorrel and things just in here. But the rest of it's all native grasses that we've sown. So essentially we have been doing this for 2012 we started, and at the moment we are at the stage of the broad acre, rolling it out into the broad acre. So we worked out from the treatments that we did to the land what worked best. We've also worked out that we've missed out a whole heap of treatments that we should have done, but we didn't, so we've got to leave that out of the project. So moving on to seed production, this is a huge part of the project. You can imagine 400 hectares in total. We need to get the seed for that, and obviously we can't go to Ian and purchase it, but we haven't got that much money. I'm sure he'd supply it. So what we've got is we've got seed production that has come from wild seed. As Bob was saying, we can't take it from the wild. It's right, in the masses we can't, but to get this, as an example, this particular crop that starts here and finishes here, because then there's another species, that came from this much seed. And just a small, very small handful from just a few plants, and we turned it into that from a nursery with a tray, putting the seed in, put the soil on top, it germinates, you put it into tubes, build the seed production area and put it into the holes. That is, generally speaking, the process we've gone through, whether it be these plants or whether it be native grasses. I'll move on to the grasses in a second. Just another way that we've undertaken seed production is foam boxes. Same process again. We haven't actually sown the seed into the boxes, we've sown it into trays, and then once they've germinated, prick them out, put them into tubes, and then once they've grown a bit more, put them into the foam boxes. Yes, there's lots of steps there, and yes, you probably could just put the seed straight into the foam box and let it go, but we didn't. We did it this way. With hindsight, I probably would go straight into the foam boxes, but you know, it takes out a lot of volunteer work that people work really hard to get this happening, and without the volunteers, we wouldn't be here. Like that, that wouldn't look like that without volunteers. Even the fence in the background there, that was volunteers that put that up. Okay, moving on to the native grasses. What I'm trying to do is just give you a picture of what we're doing with the project, at the same time reiterating what Ian and Bob have told you. I don't think I can really tell you anything new. I'm just sort of adding to it, and we're on the ground doing it. So it's, yes, Bob's done it, and yes, Ian does it. We all do it, but we've all got our own sort of different angle on it and done it slightly differently. So just there on the top line, two types of seed production that we generally deal with, and that's one with weed mat and one without weed mat. The without weed mat, we've seen from Ian and Bob. With weed mat is here. So the reason, I'll start with the most important thing, people go, well, why weed mat? The biggest reason is because when it drops on the ground, there's no contamination from other seeds, and we can actually just suck it straight up, and we know that that's the only seed that's there is the seed that we've grown. We've got a lot of these. We've got 13 landholders. Most of them, or a lot of them, are ready at the same time. It took one harvest of this particular site. Doing it myself would take about 3 days. But if the other sites are all ripe at the same time, they're all dropping. I might have volunteers that can come and help. But generally speaking, if the seed drops, that's no worries. Like, you know, just go and back it up. But if you do it a different way, like Ian was just saying where he lost a crop because he didn't get to it, he could have vacked it up, but it may be contaminated, may not be. Here, we're actually quite happy if it just drops because we'll just suck it up. So that's our benefit. We've also got a little fence around the outside. What it stops, you know, it's debatable. It stops rabbits. When you're harvesting it, it does keep the seed within the bounds of the seed production area. It doesn't stop anything else. It doesn't stop wind-blown seed from weed species. It doesn't really stop anything else. Purely for the harvesting of the seed, it's fantastic. We actually use a blower, blow it all off to the side, and then just suck it all up. Here's another picture of what Ian and Bob have already been talking about, is an in-ground seed production where there's no weed mat. It's all about site preparation, weed control, and then weed control and weed control. And it just keeps going. And yes, there's weed control in the ones that I do as well with the weed mat. There's always weed control. You cannot get away from weed control. If you learn one thing, weed control. So important. This stand of grass it's not very wide. It's only from here to here. And it's, what would say 10 metres, about 10 metres wide, but it's just a long strip. And this is actually in Clarendon. It's a SA water site. I've purely just put it there as another picture that the guys have already shown you. Okay, this is harvesting one of our sites. This is the wheatgrass that we've already seen the magical crops that Ian's got. This is the first harvest that we had. And before I was just talking about vacking. That's a horse poo vac, a greystone yard vac. We've got a yard vac and a paddock vac, and both of them have got an 8-metre hose, and that's how we suck up all the seed that's on the ground. We do use the vac that, your steel or your Makita. We do use that as well, like for different circumstances. But to suck up all the seed on this side, I can leave the vac on the outside, and I can suck, that hose will go right into the middle. And you just pull it along around the outside. So in this circumstance, we've harvested with this, which is the brush harvester. Down here, there's a brush that spins and throws the seed into the catcher in here. And that is what you've got from straight out of this. With this particular species, I wouldn't say that's particularly good. You might as well have just mown it. You might as well have done it the way Bob did it. You can do it so many different ways. The main thing to get from this is there is no fixed way to do it. You can walk along and harvest it with your hand and put it into a bag. There are so many different ways you can do it. And all of them, you end up with the same result, is you've got the seed that you can then put into the ground. That was our first harvest. The second harvest I didn't do like that at all because I learnt that that's a lot of hard work with a lot of material. So this time, second harvest was this year. No, it wasn't. It was the end of last year, 2014. I just let the seed drop. I didn't take any of that material at all. I just purely let the seed drop. And I had to wait for ages because it holds on really well with this species. It just sits there and it just sits there and it sits there. So I dealt with all the other species we had in seed production and then came back to this and went, it's starting to drop on the floor. knocked it with a broom, and ended up going through and just sucking the whole lot up. And I just had pure seed, rather than having that massive material that I had to try and spread out over tarps and dry. So, excuse me, I have worked out that the best way is just to let it drop. But that's what I do on this. Bob can't do that, so what Bob does is he windrows it, he drops it with his brush cutter, picks it all up, lays it out, dries it, and then he ends up with the seed. So that's what you would do if you were going to use this, generally speaking, because unless you're going to build one of these, $18 a square metre, that's what we've worked out that it costs. Here's another one. A nice wallaby on the right-hand side, and on the left again is wheatgrass. We've got them growing together with no divider between. Yes, there is a crossover of the species, but you know that doesn't matter. We don't care if both of those species are going into the restoration sites anyway, so we're not fussed if there's a crossover. So the same concept with the grass grabber, the brush harvester, brilliant for the wallaby, and like I was saying, not so flash for the wheatgrass. Absolutely brilliant for the wallaby. And then we go through, as you can see the guy in the back corner, or up the top there. After using the brush harvester, we vac as well. So the 30-odd% that drops from the brush harvester, you can then suck up. So you end up actually collecting 100% of the seed instead of losing some, which is generally what happens when you harvest with a brush harvester. You will lose a percentage of your seed. Just another one, this time this is maintenance, not harvesting. We're just mimicking animals. We don't have any animals in there, so we're just mowing it with a lawnmower, which is really mimicking what your horses will be doing in the paddock. This is summer this summer that we've just had, and you can see the amount of green that's on the grass. Everything else is dead. Everything's dead. Everything. It's all just dead. It's all C3 pastures that are all. There's no green in there whatsoever. This is C3, that's C3, but they're both native and they've both got green foliage that will be suitable for animals to eat. This is the development of our latest seed production area. So you can see what we've done is we've laid the weed mat and then melted holes in it and planted in the tubes. Every single plant in our seed production has come from a tray with seed in it, pricked out into a tube and then into the ground. We're approaching about 85,000, which means I've melted 85,000 holes. Yeah, it's really sore. It's a gas weeder where you basically just melt the holes with carrying a small gas bottle and melting the holes. So the concept of that is it ends up looks like that. Those particular species, that's just wallaby, and there's a stiper on the right-hand side, an ostrich stiper or speargrass. And these here are, that in particular, right, not that it matters because you can't see it, I could say it's anything. It's enteropogon, curly windmill grass. And then we've got redleg grass that Ian's talked to us about, and then we have dicampium, which was the silky bluegrass. So we're having 4 species all within this one seed production area. Not ideal if you're wanting to keep your species separate, but ours is revegetation stuff and all those species are going into our revegetation, so we're happy for them to grow together. Okay, there are so many ways that you can undertake all this that we're talking about with seeding on your property or improving pasture. You can decide, I want this paddock done by however many kilos are required from Ian, get a contractor in to prepare your site. This is at one end of the scale. Get them to seed it, and then 6 months later you've got this beautiful pasture. Or on the very other end of the scale, you don't want to spend, or you can't spend any money, you're time deficient, and there's something you need to do. You know you need to do it, that's why you're here, but you just don't know what to do. You can just have, talking to people before, they've already got native grasses. Protect and enhance what you've got. And then somewhere in the middle is this cooperative seed production area. You may have a group of 5, let's just say 5 people. It doesn't matter where you live, there might be 5 people here. You each have one species that you grow. You grow it, you harvest it, everybody harvests this throw it all in together, mix it all up, and then divide it out evenly. And then you've all got that much seed that you can then go into your prepared site that you've prepared properly the way Bob or Ian have said, or the way I'd say, which I'll tell you in a second, which is a mixture of both. And then you can start extending or just sowing small patches and extend on that. It's not expensive, it's just a cooperative way to get multiple species to be able to grow them together. Instead of having to grow all of them yourself, you're just sharing the load really, mixing it all together and then being able to sow into your own site. Then you do that every year. But most species, well, all species are going to seed once. Other species will seed more than once. Okay, site preparation. So many ways to prepare your site, as we've heard from Ian and Bob. What we like to do, or what we've done in this project at this point, is herbicide. This is a complete knockdown where we're killing everything that's there because it's all exotic, except for a couple of species that I can see, but we're not burning them. No Native Veg Council people? No. What we do is we spray it and burn it in winter. So this is July last year or the year before, and we had a group of people on site, and we're burning it in a way that the CFS is happy with. We've had a certain amount of training in that respect, and then we come through afterwards and sow it. There's a slight problem with this because we have found we're getting weeds that we had no idea that were there. They weren't there before. It's like, where have they come from? Soil disturbance or cultivation of some sort. When we're sowing, we're disturbing the soil. I'll show you our machine in a minute. And we're actually creating the seed that's already sitting there in the seed bank, the 20,000 that are in that square metre. We're disturbing that and giving them the optimum time and place to germinate. And we're putting our few seeds in there as well. So that's just causing even more problems. So essentially site preparation, although this is what we've done and it has worked, the weeds, like how many times we could say it is just, I'm just learning it more and more. You know, you hear people say it and you go, yeah, there's no weeds there, I've killed them, whatever. You watch, you just scratch up the soil and give it a bit of water and bang, you've got some more that you didn't know were there. I'm not saying that's going to happen on all sites, but that's what happens sometimes on some sites. This particular site, to give you an example, is a mosaic burn. So we've got grasses or areas that we want to protect, so we haven't sprayed them and we're not burning them. There's like bits here and bits there that are burnt, and it's more of a restoration. So we're not going through and doing, it's like extending something. So if you've got, a pasture, lunch is coming back on me. You've got a pasture or you've got a paddock where you have the existing species that you want to protect. This could be any one of your guys' properties. You're wanting to protect these things, and here you've got cocksfoot and phalaris or other species. So you spray them, you burn them. This is what we've done on this site, and then we've come in and sown them with one more step in between. I missed that slide, but what we've done is we've come through with a harrow to disturb the soil and then sprayed it again. So you get a flush of all the species that you've just disturbed that are all sitting there in the soil just waiting for you. We've disturbed them, they've popped up, and then we've killed them again. So that is the one step that Ian mentioned doing it twice. Bob says about doing it 3 times. Initially, we only did it once. Once is not enough. Well proven. Know that, because we've gone back to sites and gone, what? Like, this is just more weeds than it was to start off with. Just that extra 1 or 2 herbicide events or disturbance events with weed control makes a huge difference. This is, again, the same sort of thing, extending your area of, it's just site preparation for where we're going to seed. You can see what's green and what's brown. So we're planning on sowing, and we have already sown in the areas that are brown. That's just another way of, it's the way that we've gone with our site preparation to seeding. But this is what I've said, is we're adding in that extra step of soil disturbance with the harrows and spraying again. That is so important. This is Ian's a book, a mini book document that he's come up with that gives you the answers in some respects of what you need to do to make sure you're going to be successful in growing your native grasses. You've got it in your packs, I think. Everybody's got a copy of it. So it's a few pages long, and it basically doesn't necessarily give you every single detail, but it tells you what you have to do to be successful. So pay attention to that. This is a site that I've seeded recently, and that's what it looked like afterwards. You can see the site preparation's been good because there's no weeds there. But how long has that been prepared for? It's had multiple, I'll say, harrowing and multiple spraying. So the seed bank has been greatly reduced. To what extent we'll see when everything starts germinating, but that's only just recently been sown. This is another one that I have sown. Again, this is with a machine. I just took a photo out the window because I thought it looked really cool with all the... Don't mind me. Okay, so that's the machine I'm using. It's not... We've seen lots of machinery. It's not the only way we do it. This is just one of the ways we do it, and this... I'm not sure if I've got another picture, so I'll just... This seed box here has been especially engineered for us to deliver the seed mix that we've got. And it's actually owned by Bob and Wanda. That's the tractor that I'm generally speaking driving. And this site you can see is black because that was one of the sites we burnt as the site preparation. Okay, here's the harrows. This particular site, again, this is the hand cast. It took, I think it was actually quicker than using the machine. I ran over this whole entire site that had been prepared, it had been sprayed, it had been burned, and then I came along with the harrows, ran over it with the harrows, hand cast the seed by myself, nobody else was there, and it's across a ridge, and that area that you can see there is probably a tenth of the total area. I've got the seed all mixed up in this box here. So I've cast out the seed and then I've just run over it again with the harrows, and that's it. Left the site, I was there for about 5 hours. So the event of actually seeding after you've done all your site preparation it's pretty easy. Depending on what equipment you've got will depend on how long it's going to take, but it's all pretty straightforward and pretty easy. This is a different site, you'll recognise Kim there. This is a restoration site. So it's been prepared, it's been sprayed a couple of times. This site in particular hasn't had a harrow or anything like that, it's just had multiple sprays. What we're doing is we're running over it with a rake. It's just a fire rake, so it's got less prongs. Along the same concept as what Bob was saying, is it's easier to, if you've got all these really close prongs on a rake, it's really hard to actually scratch it into the soil. The fire rake has only got 4 or 5 prongs. And so we've scratched over this whole surface that you can see in front. And then we've hand cast straight out of a bag. It might have taken us an hour to scratch it up, an hour to hand cast it back over, and then 20 minutes to rake back over. So after a couple of hours we'd done, I don't know how many square metres, would that have been a few hundred square metres between the two of us over a few hours. So it's really, really a simple process to be able to actually get your seed into the ground. There's a lot of native grasses around in here. Down here that you just can't see what the species are, but there's stiper and speargrass and some other wallaby grasses. So we're just adding the species to increase species diversity. That's our aim on this particular site. No machinery could get in, so it was a really good excuse and a good way for us to just go in there with the rakes, go in there with the seed, and just let's see how long this takes us. And we just did the 3-step process, and we were out after a few hours. It was really... Yeah, well, and it was cold. It was a pretty cold, windy, horrible day too. It looks quite nice in the picture. This, just to give you an example of seeding at the wrong time, having a dry season. These are all C3 grasses. All of them are winter growing grasses. This was sown late last year. As you all know, the spring rains were minimal, certainly not enough on this site or any other site, probably across the Adelaide Hills, to sustain the proper establishment of most species. But what you can see there, besides the odd Jane and Jane, and probably a couple of other flat weeds, that's all native grass. Every single one of those little, there might be the odd one that's not, but all of these little green bits, they're only like this high, but they're all wallaby, wheatgrass, stiper, speargrass, sorry. It does work, even in the situation, this is native grasses for you, even in the situation where they're deprived of a larger amount of moisture that they would normally get, they still survive. They survived summer that we just had we didn't supplement anything. That's in an open paddock, there's no trees, there's nothing. It's a relatively shallow soil, there's rock all over the place. It's not, it's not deep soils at all. And they survived. Yes, there's no grazing other than the kangaroos, but they survive, and they're hardy as anything. Super hardy. So what next? When Bob and Ian were both talking, the amount of times I had something to add, or I had something to, and I've forgotten them all. So I can't say so many things that I wanted to add to what they were saying, just to add that little bit. But what they've said, and I've kind of only reiterated bits and pieces of what they said, as well as showing you my project, or our project. But this is what we're at, so what next? And this is putting together what you've heard today and the options of where you can go. Like I said, there's at one end, getting a contractor in and having the whole site done for you. I mean, it'd be great if we all had that sort of money. And then to the other end of the scale, where we're just scratching around with the seed that we're finding off the native grasses that we've already got. The only problem with that I see about just using the species that you've got, quite often a lot of the native grasses that are around here aren't the high forage species. The wheatgrass, yes, you do have it, but you might not have it, you might have it, you might not have it. So it's really good to be able to get the species that are significant forage for the animal. And that's what it's all about, isn't it? We're all, you're all here because of it's about feed for your horses. So there's no point in having, oh, that's a native grass. It's no good because there's no forage on it. But why would you extend that species? So, yeah, this is something that we now need to really think about where to go from here. So I don't really have anything else to say. You can all ask questions or whatever, but that's me done.